Britain teeters on the edge of an abyss, its democratic soul quaking as the once impenetrable facade of the Labour Party crumbles under the weight of its own perfidy. Angela Rayner, long venerated as the gritty, salt-of-the-earth saviour of the working masses, has been unmasked as a hollow effigy, a puppet dangling from the strings of a malevolent political machine bent on strangling the lifeblood of this nation. And it was Katie Hopkins, that unrelenting herald of unvarnished truth, who lit the fuse of an inferno now raging through Labour's meticulously crafted edifice of lies. What we once naively dismissed as bumbling incompetence has been laid bare as something infinitely more sinister. A diabolical conspiracy woven with threads of deception, manipulation, and raw, unquenchable ambition. This is no mere political misstep. It is a seismic rupture in the bedrock of governance, a betrayal so monstrous it threatens to obliterate Labour as a viable entity in the annals of British history. Hopkins didn't simply expose Rayner. She plunged a dagger into the festering heart of a party that has dared to cloak itself in the garb of righteousness while secretly forging chains to bind the British people. Before you plunge deeper into this abyss of revelation, the mainstream media, those spineless lackeys of the establishment, have turned their craven gaze from this cataclysm, frantically shielding Labour from the reckoning it so richly deserves. But Hopkins, with a ferocity that shattered the airwaves, unveiled a scandal so explosive it reverberates through every hamlet and city of this beleaguered land. Under Rayner's so-called stewardship, Labour has not merely stumbled, it has waged a clandestine war against the very citizens it claims to champion. The party's polished veneer of fairness, equality, and democracy has been ripped asunder, revealing a grotesque tableau of hypocrisy, avarice, and ruthless power lust. With words sharp as a guillotine's edge, Hopkins sliced through the propaganda to expose a chilling reality. Labour has been toiling in the shadows to rig the electoral system itself, a brazen assault on the sacred pillars of democracy. Yes, let that sink into your marrow. The party that preens as the guardian of the people's voice stands accused of twisting the machinery of elections to cement its iron grip, a plot so audacious it defies comprehension. When confronted with the stench of their own duplicity, what does Labour offer? Not contrition, not transparency, but a hollow silence broken only by feeble deflections and evasions. Rayner, the supposed beacon of the downtrodden, stands revealed as a mere marionette, her every gesture dictated by a political apparatus that feasts on deceit. But Hopkins's crusade did not halt at Rayner. She turned her blazing scrutiny upon Labour's sanctimonious claims of moral supremacy. For years, they have draped themselves in the mantle of justice and equity, yet behind the velvet curtain, their hands drip with the grime of corruption. Clandestine bargains, shadowy pacts, and policies sculpted not for the public salvation but to fortify their own dominion. The evidence is an avalanche, the implications apocalyptic. Labour's desperation to cling to its ill-gotten throne has driven it to the unthinkable, delaying local elections until 2027, a maneuver so nakedly despotic it freezes the blood in one's veins. Why, you ask? Because they see the storm gathering. Reform UK rises like a phoenix from the ashes of disillusionment, the people stir from their long slumber, and Labour's only recourse is to throttle democracy in its cradle. Let us delve deeper into this abyss, for the stakes could not be higher. Labour's alleged plot to subvert the electoral process is not a fleeting whisper, it is a meticulously engineered assault on the very essence of British sovereignty. Picture, if you will, a cabal of Labour strategists hunched over maps and voter rolls in dimly lit rooms, their faces twisted with the glee of unchecked power. These are not idle speculations but chilling possibilities grounded in the revelations Hopkins has thrust into the public square. Reports, suppressed by the complicit media, suggest that Labour has been exploring ways to manipulate voter registration, to flood the system with phantom ballots from loyal enclaves while erecting labyrinthine barriers to disenfranchise those who might oppose them. This is no mere tinkering with the edges of democracy. It is a wholesale rewriting of the rules to ensure that Labour's reign becomes an unassailable fortress. Imagine the audacity, a party that shrieks from the rooftops about the sanctity of the vote, now accused of forging a system where the outcome is preordained. Hopkins laid bare the evidence, leaked memos, hushed conversations, and the sudden, inexplicable shifts in electoral policy that defy rational explanation. Labour's minions, cloaked in bureaucratic jargon, murmur of modernising the voting process, but Hopkins pierced through the euphemisms to reveal the truth. They seek to drown the voice of the people in a deluge of engineered consent. And what of Rayner? She stands at the epicenter of this machination, her every platitude about fairness a grotesque mockery as she oversees a scheme to tilt the scales irrevocably in Labour's favour. The delay of local elections to 2027 is but the tip of this iceberg, a desperate gambit to buy time as Reform UK's insurgency threatens to sweep them into oblivion. This is not politics as usual. It is the death knell of democracy, rung by a party that would rather rule over ashes than relinquish its crown. But the conspiracy deepens still. Labour's architects have not contented themselves with mere procedural trickery. They have enlisted an army of loyalists, council officials, electoral commissioners, even grassroots operatives, to execute their vision. Whispers abound of voter rolls padded with fictitious names, of polling stations relocated to confuse the opposition's base, of ballots disappearing into the ether when they bear the wrong mark. These are not the actions of a party confident in its mandate, they are the frantic scrabblings of a regime staring into the abyss of its own irrelevance. Hopkins, with her unerring instinct for truth, has dragged these horrors into the light, forcing Labour to scramble for cover as the edifice of their legitimacy crumbles. And yet, they persist, doubling down on their treachery with a brazenness that beggars belief, convinced that the British people are too weary, too distracted, to notice the noose tightening around their necks. If the electoral plot were not damning enough, Hopkins has unearthed a scandal that strikes at the very sovereignty of this nation. Labour's entanglement with dark money and shadowy foreign influence. For years, they have pointed accusatory fingers at their rivals, decrying the spectre of outside interference, yet now the tables have turned with a vengeance. Hopkins has revealed that Labour, under the stewardship of Rayner and Keir Starmer, has been quietly supping at the trough of foreign largesse. Secret funds flowing from organisations with no love for Britain's traditions, no respect for its laws, and a ravenous desire to bend this nation to their will. These are not benevolent philanthropists but ruthless players in a global game, their coffers brimming with gold meant to buy influence, rewrite legislation, and dismantle the very fabric of British identity. The evidence, though buried by Labour's media allies, is as undeniable as it is terrifying. Leaked documents, snippets of which Hopkins brandished like a torch in the darkness, point to clandestine meetings between Labour's inner circle and corporate titans, international pressure groups, and even emissaries of foreign powers. These are not casual encounters but strategic alliances, forged in the crucible of mutual ambition. In exchange for their coin, these shadowy benefactors demand policies that erode Britain's borders, flood its markets with their wares, and silence the voices of those who would resist. Labour, ever the willing vassal, has complied, crafting legislation that favours the few while strangling the many, all while Rayner parrots platitudes about progress and inclusion to mask the betrayal. Consider the implications. A party that once swore to defend the working class now sells Britain's future to the highest bidder. Hopkins has named the beast. Globalist cabals with names whispered only in the corridors of power, corporations hungry for deregulation, and foreign entities eager to see Britain reduced to a pliable pawn on their chessboard. The money flows like a poisoned river, funding Labour's campaigns, shaping its rhetoric, and ensuring that every decision serves not the British people but the faceless masters pulling the strings. Rayner, with her carefully curated image of down-to-earth relatability, emerges as the chief enforcer of this sellout, her every speech a scripted lie designed to lull the public into complacency while her party auctions off the nation's soul. This is not mere corruption. It is treason cloaked in the guise of governance, a betrayal that cuts deeper with every pound that changes hands. And what of the policies born from this unholy union? Look no further than the skyrocketing cost of living, the crumbling public services, the unchecked tide of immigration, all engineered not by accident but by design. Labour's benefactors demand a Britain too broken, too dependent, to resist their dominion, and Rayner's leadership has delivered it with ruthless precision. Hopkins's revelations peel back the layers of this conspiracy, exposing a party that has traded its principles for power, its loyalty for lucre. The mainstream media, complicit to its core, scrambles to bury these truths, but the cracks are widening. Britain's sovereignty hangs by a thread, and Labour's greed may yet snap it entirely. But Labour's ambitions extend beyond elections and foreign coffers. They seek to seize the very institutions that define this nation. Hopkins has sounded the alarm on a slow-moving coup, a systematic infiltration of the pillars meant to uphold justice, education, and order. The mainstream media, long a mouthpiece for Labour's propaganda, is but the vanguard of this assault. Beneath the surface, a more insidious transformation unfolds. Schools turned into indoctrination camps, courts bent to the will of Labour's allies, and police forces mould into enforcers of a partisan agenda. This is not hyperbole. It is the grim reality Hopkins has dragged into the spotlight, a reality Labour prays the public never fully grasps. In education, the rot begins early. Teachers, handpicked for their ideological purity, weave Labour's narratives into the minds of the young. Tales of class warfare, rewritten history, and a Britain guilty of every sin save its own survival. Textbooks are scrubbed of inconvenient truths, replaced with dogma that paints Labour as the eternal savior and its critics as villains. Parents, alarmed by the transformation of their children into mouthpieces for party rhetoric, find their protests ignored or vilified. This is no accident but a deliberate strategy, exposed by Hopkins through whispers from whistleblowers within the system. A generation molded to serve Labour's ends, their independence sacrificed on the altar of political expediency. The judicial system fares no better. Judges, quietly elevated through Labour's influence, dispense rulings that favour the party's allies while crushing its foes. Cases of political dissent vanish into legal limbo, while activists aligned with Labour's causes walk free despite flagrant violations. Hopkins has pointed to specific instances, buried by the press, of leniency for Labour-friendly agitators juxtaposed with harsh sentences for those who dare to speak out. The scales of justice, once blind, now wink knowingly at their masters in Westminster, and Rayner's silence on these travesties speaks volumes of her complicity. And then there is law enforcement, the final bastion of order turned into a tool of suppression. Police chiefs, beholden to Labour's patronage, turn a blind eye to riots and unrest when they serve the party's narrative, yet descend with fury upon peaceful protesters who challenge the status quo. Hopkins has unearthed reports of officers instructed to prioritise hate speech over violent crime, their targets invariably those who expose Labour's failures. This is not policing, it is a Praetorian Guard for a regime that fears the people it claims to represent. Together, these institutions form the scaffolding of Labour's tyranny, a framework Rayner and her ilk have erected to ensure their dominance endures beyond any ballot box. Perhaps no issue lays bare Labour's cynicism more starkly than immigration, a policy sold as compassion but wielded as a cudgel against democracy itself. For years, they have championed open borders under the banner of humanitarianism, their voices dripping with sanctimony as they decry their critics as bigots. But Hopkins has ripped away the mask, revealing a strategy so cold-blooded it chills the soul. Labour is not merely permitting mass migration, they are orchestrating it to reshape the electorate in their image. Leaked documents, their authenticity a dagger to Labour's denials, suggest internal discussions of demographic engineering, a calculated bid to flood Britain with new voters loyal to their cause, ensuring that opposition strongholds are drowned in a tide of engineered consent. This is no conspiracy theory but a blueprint laid bare by Hopkins's relentless pursuit of truth. Labour strategists, in their own words, have mused on the power of shifting populations to secure long-term electoral dominance. They see every boat that crosses the channel, every unchecked border, as a brick in the wall of their permanent majority. Rayner, with her crocodile tears for the plight of migrants, stands as a key architect of this gambit, her every plea for tolerance a veiled maneuver to tighten Labour's grip. The consequences are already felt, communities strained to breaking, resources stretched thin, and a nation fractured by policies that serve not its people but its rulers. The genius of this scheme lies in its deniability. Labour cloaks its ambition in moral superiority, branding any dissent as racism to silence the chorus of alarm. But Hopkins has shattered the illusion, forcing Britain to confront the stark reality. Immigration under Labour is not a humanitarian mission but a political weapon, a slow-motion coup against the will of the native-born. The numbers swell, the demographics shift, and Labour's strategists smile, knowing that each new arrival is a step closer to an unassailable future. This is the legacy Rayner seeks to leave. Not unity, not progress, but a Britain remade to kneel before her party's altar. And so we arrive at the precipice, the moment where Labour's empire of deceit faces its greatest peril. The lies are unraveling, the scandals multiplying, and the people awakening. Yet a cornered beast is at its most dangerous. Labour, sensing the walls closing in, has embarked on its most reckless gambit yet, a campaign of chaos, division, and suppression to cling to power at any cost. Rayner and Starmer, their masks slipping, orchestrate a strategy that could plunge Britain into its darkest hour, all to shield their rotting edifice from collapse. The playbook is clear. First, they stoke division, class warfare, racial tensions, generational rifts, anything to turn the people against each other and away from the true enemy within. Then, they brand their critics as extremists, wielding the media to paint dissent as a threat to national stability. New laws creep forward, cloaked as safeguards but designed to criminalize opposition, hate speech redefined as any word against Labour, surveillance tightened to strangle free thought. The economy, already buckling, is pushed deeper into crisis by reckless policies, a populace made dependent on a government that thrives on their misery. And the elections, oh, the elections. Labour prepares its most audacious fraud yet, laws bent, votes conjured, and chaos primed to erupt should the people dare to reject them. But there is hope amid the horror. for Labour's arrogance has overreached. The British people, long lulled by apathy, now stir with the fury born of betrayal. Hopkins has lit the spark, and the fire spreads, through whispered truths, shared outrage, and a growing resolve to reclaim their nation. Labour may rig the system, silence the brave, and rewrite the rules, but they cannot extinguish the will of a people united. The reckoning looms, inevitable as the dawn. Rayner's world unravels, Labour's lies collapse, and Britain stands at a crossroads. Will it succumb to tyranny's embrace, or rise to cast off the chains? The choice is ours: act, resist, and demand the future we deserve, or watch it slip forever into the abyss.